In this presentation, we'll continue to explore the historical developments within the localization industry during the 1990s and into the 21st century. In our previous presentation, we saw how localization emerged as a process during the 1980s as rapid developments in the production of computer hardware and software created the need for localization. We also learned that during the 1980s, localization was a two-part process. First, the software product was developed and released, and after that, it was localized. We saw that this was a somewhat problematic workflow, and we heard how internationalization emerged as a preparatory step in response to the problems encountered. So let's continue our journey into the history of the localization industry. By the early 1990s, the localization services industry was expanding rapidly. The arrival of the Internet brought an explosion of localizable content, and new translation technologies were offering time and cost-saving benefits. The German language service provider Trados released its translation memory software Translators Workbench in 1992, which offered users the benefits not only of translation memory, but also allowing them to store and manage terminology in a customizable database using software called Multiterm. Pasilo, a localization tool used for translating software interfaces, text strings, and accompanying documentation, was released in 1998 by the German company Pass Engineering. Pasilo had originally been developed for their in-house use on medical software localization projects. In 2005, SDL, a large language service provider based in the UK, acquired Trados before also acquiring Pass Engineering in 2007. SDL combined the translation and localization programs of its acquisitions, re-releasing them for sale in 2009 as SDL Trados Studio. Along with developments in translation technology, the 1990s was also a period of consolidation in the industry. As we saw in Esselink's article, the 1990s saw many mergers and acquisitions. Large MLVs, or multi-language vendors, such as those language service providers who sell translations into more than one target language, were competing to grow their businesses and acquire a larger share of the localization services industry. Outsourcing also developed further as tech companies outsourced their projects to MLVs, who, in turn, then recruited their own outsourced SLVs, or single language vendors, such as most freelance translators, who produce translations into just one target language. This outsourcing framework still prevails in the industry today. The localization industry also began to focus on professionalization with the creation of open standards for data exchange and increased activity and engagement from the professional associations and collaborative organizations, such as the Localization Industry Standards Association, or LISA, and the Open Standards for Container Content Allowing Reuse, or OSCA. These collaborations led to the development of the TMX file format, or Translation Memory Exchange format, which was created specifically for the sharing and reuse of translation memory databases. Unfortunately, LISA dissolved its organization in 2011, but its work on open standards has been continued by other organizations such as GALA, the Globalization and Localization Association, which has led to the creation of other open standards such as term-based exchange files, or TBX, and the XML-based localization interchange file format known as XLIF. The localization workflow process typically involved a number of professionals with a range of technical and project management skills. In Esselink's description, the project manager oversees the schedules and budgets, which involves planning the timescale and cost of the project and anticipating any issues which may impact on the timely delivery of localized materials. The linguist would be employed to translate or recreate the message, as well as to quality check the work of other linguists in the project in accordance with criteria defined by the client and project manager. The localization engineer would be responsible for rebuilding and testing the localized product to ensure its full functionality and suitability, and a desktop publishing engineer would produce the related product documentation, either in printed or online format. This workflow was built around software localization in particular, but as technology advanced and the Internet arrived, so there was an impact on the type and quantity of material requiring localization. As the industry became increasingly professionalized, there was a need to define new key terms to describe the set of processes in the two-part localization process of the 1980s, and a move towards what became known as SIMship, the simultaneous shipment of multiple language versions of a product. These terms were globalization, internationalization, localization, and translation, which formed the acronym GILT. Many industry professionals now refer to it as the GILT Industry in recognition of the fact that if localization of a product is to be successful, it should be preceded by the earlier stages of globalization and internationalization. So the acronym GILT represents the order in which these processes are carried out. Let's look at these terms in more detail. Globalization addresses the business issues associated with taking a product global. In the globalization of high-tech products, this involves integrating localization throughout a company. So globalization involves changes to business and management processes, as well as changes to advertising and marketing processes. As discussed in our previous presentation, internationalization is the process of generalizing a product so that it can handle multiple languages and cultural conventions without the need for redesign. Internationalization takes place at the level of program design and document development. There are key benefits to completing the internationalization phase, such as a reduction in the time and cost of localization projects, as problems are anticipated and addressed in advance, which facilitates SIMship. Furthermore, the use of a single source code enables easier maintenance during updates and version management, and improves the code architecture. Localization, as we now know, involves taking a product and making it linguistically and culturally appropriate to the target locale where it will be used. To localize a product, changes might be made to various elements, such as character sets, fonts, colors, dates, times, monetary formats, images, sound effects, or text. Lastly, translation is the rendering of written content from one language to another. Lisa defines translation as only one of the activities in localization projects, which may include many other tasks such as project management, software engineering, testing, and desktop publishing. Files for translation may come in a number of different formats, and these days will require specialist software to process them. For example, translation management systems or computer-assisted translation or CAT tools, which we'll learn more about in later units. As our historical journey approaches the turn of the 21st century, new types of localization projects began to emerge as the Internet and mobile technologies brought an explosion of new content. Whereas initially most localization projects during the 1980s and 90s revolved around software, we started to see localization projects involving not only software programs, but also video games, mobile applications, websites, multimedia files such as video, and audio and marketing content. Converting a website into another language is a process similar to that of software localization, in that it moves further away from the idea of taking only text and translating it. Website localization involves the adaptation of the same elements discussed earlier, such as fonts, images, colors, and character sets. Like a software localization project, there is always accompanying documentation in website localization, such as general terms and conditions, privacy policies, frequently asked questions, as well as a wider range of media types, such as blogs, videos, and audio. Furthermore, as with software localization, it's also necessary to localize the website interface, dealing with both the front and back end of the site, as well as the content. There may also be content which is not translated directly, but may be radically adapted or even replaced entirely to better suit the interests of the target language market. Consequently, those working in localization need to have an awareness of certain characteristics of website text, namely that it is subject to much more frequent updates than printed text. The text will be read on screen, and it may be read in any order the user chooses. Also, that the readership of the text is generally unspecified and may include a mixture of native and non-native language speakers. There are also textual conventions to consider relating to the production of website text, where long sentences or long paragraphs are generally not used, and the text is often populated with links to other related content. In light of these considerations relating to website text, the localization of website content also created another new language service known as Transcreation. This term came about by combining translation and recreation of a text. As a language service, it combines translation and copywriting in order to adapt the message of the text from one language to another while maintaining the original intent, style, and tone to ensure that the message is culturally appropriate. It's often used in advertising, where the direct or literal translation of slogans would negatively impact on the target audience's reception of the product. In such cases, a greater level of textual intervention is required to ensure that the message is culturally appropriate. The GILT industry today is a thriving workplace. In 2017, Gala estimated the size of the global language industry to be around $43 billion, with an expectation that it would be worth around $45 billion by the year 2020. The language technology industry alone is estimated to be worth around €29 billion, and Gala also estimates that industry growth is set to continue at a projected rate of 6.5 to 7.5% annually. This concludes our journey through the history of the localization industry. Please click Next to return to the timeline to learn more about the impact of translation technologies on translated output, the role of the professional associations, and to meet the team in our fictional agency, the Localization Bakery.